In the heart of Texas, the year 2001 began quietly at the John B. Connally Unit, a maximum security prison built to hold some of the state's most dangerous criminals. The walls were tall, the guards vigilant, and the routines tight. On the surface, the facility seemed impregnable. The streets outside whispered about the Texas Seven, 7 men whose names would soon strike fear across the state, but inside the walls they were just another group of inmates, blending into the daily monotony of prison life. Each of the 7 had a story marked by violence, cunning, and determination. Some were hardened criminals who had learned every trick to survive behind bars. Others had been caught for crimes that left communities in shock. Alone, each man seemed dangerous. Together, they were a storm waiting to break. They didn't meet as friends, they met as inmates, drawn together by shared opportunity and ambition. Over time, they learned each other's strengths, weaknesses, and routines. Trust among men in prison is rare, and yet necessity demanded it. To pull off what no one had thought possible, they had to become a team. From the beginning, their planning was subtle. Guards noticed odd behaviors, tools missing from workshops, small repairs left undone, patterns in the prisoners' movements that didn't add up. But suspicion was never concrete. Each man acted as though he belonged, performing his chores, attending programs, and avoiding direct confrontation. They studied every guard, every schedule, every blind spot. Months of observation went unnoticed, dismissed as boredom or coincidence. But in reality, it was the beginning of a meticulously orchestrated plan. The prison's routines, which seemed to offer safety, became their roadmap. Each inmate contributed something unique to the scheme. Some were physically strong, capable of overpowering obstacles that might have seemed impossible. Others were clever with their hands, able to manipulate locks, create improvised tools, and improvise solutions when the plan required them to adapt. One had the patience to memorize schedules down to the minute, ensuring that every step would align with a moment when supervision was light. Together they became more than men, they became a system. What made the Texas Seven so dangerous wasn't just their ambition. It was their intelligence, their patience, and the eerie calm with which they executed their plans. They understood the psychology of fear. They understood the prison inside out, and they understood the weaknesses of those who were meant to keep them contained. And perhaps most importantly, they trusted each other to a degree that outsiders could never comprehend. Weeks turned into months. Every day, subtle actions built toward a single goal. They experimented with techniques to bypass security measures, noting how guards responded to minor disruptions and adjusting accordingly. They discovered patterns in the movement of keys, the rotation of guards, and the layout of gates. They identified weaknesses in schedules that no one else had noticed. Every observation became part of a mental blueprint, and every blueprint became a part of the eventual escape. In the quiet hours of the night, when the prison corridors were dimly lit and nearly empty, the men would meet, not openly but in fleeting moments where no one could see. They whispered, exchanged small pieces of information, and refined their strategies. In these moments, the ordinary walls of confinement transformed into the canvas for something extraordinary, a plan that would shock the state and the nation. The escape wasn't spontaneous. It was calculated down to the smallest detail. They didn't rush, they didn't panic, and they didn't rely on luck. They relied on observation, patience, and timing. The more routine the prison became, the more advantage they gained. Every guard who became complacent, every schedule that repeated predictably, every security measure that was treated as invincible, all of it became a tool in the hands of the Texas Seven. Even among themselves, trust had to be earned and maintained. Any slip, any misstep could unravel months of careful planning. Yet, against the odds, they worked together with precision. Each man understood his role, and each role was critical. Some distracted, some observed, some executed maneuvers that required careful timing and skill. Together, they created a symphony of crime, silent and invisible to those around them, moving in shadows that the prison staff never fully perceived. Outside, the world had no idea. Families, reporters, and law enforcement assumed the prison was secure. The Texas Seven, however, continued their preparation quietly, each day bringing them closer to the moment when they would test the limits of the prison's walls. The tension inside those walls was palpable, though no one outside could feel it. The inmates moved like shadows in a room filled with people who never noticed them, each step bringing them nearer to freedom, each moment a testament to their cunning and audacity. Eventually, every small risk was accounted for, every potential failure anticipated, every element rehearsed. Their plan, forged in secrecy and honed over months of observation, was ready to unfold. And when the day finally came, the Texas Seven would demonstrate what few believed possible. that 7 determined men united in purpose and patient in execution, could outsmart a maximum security prison designed to contain the most dangerous criminals in the state. It was not a story of chance or luck. It was the story of calculation, of intelligence, of teamwork honed under the most extreme circumstances. The prison walls, the guards, the schedules, they were all pieces of a puzzle, and the Texas 7 had solved it long before the first alarm would sound. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the men would already be gone, leaving behind stunned officers, shocked administrators, and a nation struggling to understand how such a feat had been possible. The 2001 Texas 7 escape was more than a criminal act. It was a masterclass in observation, planning, and psychological manipulation. It was a terrifying reminder that even the most secure walls can be outsmarted when patience, intelligence, and audacity collide. And for the 7 men who executed it, it was a moment of freedom, brief though it would be, that no one could have imagined in the sterile halls of John B. Connally Unit. The night of November 5, 2000, at the John B. Connally Unit in Texas seemed ordinary to the guards making their rounds. Lights flickered along the long corridors, echoing the rhythmic footsteps of officers on patrol. But in the shadows, 7 men were about to turn every assumption about security and control upside down. Months of planning, observation, and quiet preparation were about to pay off in a way that would shock the state and the nation. The escape began with precision. The inmates moved through the facility like shadows, each man performing a role he had memorized perfectly. Some disabled alarms and locks, carefully avoiding detection. Others distracted guards or used their knowledge of blind spots and routines to ensure no interruption. Every step was calculated, every movement rehearsed. It was the kind of orchestration that seemed impossible, except it wasn't. The Texas 7 had prepared for every contingency, anticipating every obstacle, every guard, every possible setback. By the time the first alarm rang, they were already outside the perimeter, slipping through areas of the fence where they knew patrols were lighter. The cold night air bit at their faces, but adrenaline kept them moving. They navigated the darkness with a mixture of speed and caution, aware that a single misstep could mean recapture, or worse. The world outside the prison gates felt surreal, vast, and free compared to the cramped corridors they had mastered for so long. Yet freedom had its own dangers. Police were already mobilizing, and news of the escape would spread faster than the men could run. The media erupted as word of the breakout reached the public. 7 inmates, all dangerous and convicted of violent crimes, had escaped a maximum security prison in broad daylight, or so the headlines suggested. Local law enforcement scrambled, issuing alerts and warnings. Communities were on edge, fearing the unknown. Each man was a threat on his own, but together they had demonstrated a level of coordination that few could comprehend. Over the next several weeks, the Texas 7 moved with calculated care. They stole vehicles, disguised their appearances, and relied on safe houses and sympathetic contacts to evade capture. Every action was deliberate, every decision weighed for its risk. Law enforcement attempted to track them using the evidence left behind, analyzing every clue, every stolen car, every purchase. But the men were always one step ahead, adapting and improvising when plans went awry. Their escape was no longer just a physical feat, it was a psychological game, a cat-and-mouse battle with authorities who had never faced criminals this cunning. As days turned into weeks, tension mounted. The public grew fearful. Families locked their doors, schools heightened security, and law enforcement agencies from multiple states coordinated efforts to locate the fugitives. The Texas 7 became legends in the news, their faces plastered across newspapers and television screens. Yet the men themselves remained largely invisible, moving in shadows and disappearing into ordinary towns and highways. Their ability to blend in and outsmart officials created a sense of paranoia that gripped the region. Behind the scenes, cracks began to show. Resources were stretched thin, mistakes were made, and disagreements surfaced among the escapees. Even the most disciplined individuals are not immune to fatigue, hunger, and fear. Small errors began to compound, and the authorities slowly closed in. Each recapture, each confrontation highlighted the extreme risk these men had taken and the incredible skill they had shown in escaping a supposedly inescapable prison. The story of the Texas 7 became not just about crime, but about strategy, observation, and the limits of human cunning. Eventually, the manhunt ended in tragic violence. Some were caught alive, facing justice for their audacious crimes. Others died during confrontations, a stark reminder that freedom gained through deception carries a heavy cost. Families of victims, communities, and even the men themselves would live with the consequences of those weeks for the rest of their lives. The escape had lasted for weeks, captured national attention, and left an indelible mark on the history of criminal justice in America. The legacy of the Texas 7 escape remains a story of audacity, intelligence, and desperation. It's a chilling example of how even the most secure systems can be outsmarted by planning, observation, and teamwork. And it serves as a haunting reminder that when humans are pushed to extremes, they can achieve acts both brilliant and terrifying. The 7 men had escaped, yes, but the story they left behind would never be forgotten.